Today we're going to be talking about comparing and ordering fractions and decimals. When we compare and order numbers, fractions, decimals, whatever, we use greater than, less than, or equal to compare those numbers. So we've got two different methods here. With our first method, we can write the fraction as a decimal. We talked about that yesterday. So when we change 3/10 to a decimal, we write our first one. We've got 33 hundredths. Then we need to change this 3/10 into a hundredths decimal. So we've got 3/10 here, and we want to make that equal to 100. So what do I have to do to this 10 to get it to be 100? Well, I know 10 times 10 gives me 100. If I do it to the bottom, remember I have to also do it to the top. So 3 times 10, and that gives me 30 hundredths. And then I write that as a decimal. So 0.30. And then I can see that 33 hundredths is bigger than 30 hundredths. So that tells me that 33 hundredths is greater than 3/10 or 30 hundredths. Now our second method is to write the decimal as a fraction and rewrite 3/10 with a denominator of a 100. Which is what I did up here. Then compare your fractions. So now we look and we have 33 over 100 is greater than, we got 3/10, we're going to change that like I did up here to 30 hundredths. So 30 over 100. So again, we can see 33 hundredths is greater than 30 hundredths. So you've got two options. You can either rewrite your fraction as a decimal, or you can rewrite your decimal as a fraction, okay? Now comparing and ordering is tied together. We can say, compare these two numbers, greater than, less than, equal to, but if I have more than two numbers, I can put two numbers in order. Like I can say least to greatest, this would be 30 hundredths and then 33 hundredths. But to order the numbers, you have to know which one is bigger and which one is smaller. So we're going to order 7 hundredths, 2 twentieths, and 2 hundredths from least, smallest, to greatest, biggest. So we have to first write each decimal as a fraction. So we have here 7 hundredths. Remember from yesterday, we say it out loud, 7 hundredths. That means I'm going to write 7 over 100. Then my other decimal, 2 hundredths. Said it out loud, 2 hundredths, that's 2 over 100. And then the one that I have is 2 twentieths. Now I have to write each of these fractions with common denominators and then compare. Now I have two fractions here with a denominator of a 100. So let's go ahead and just change this 2 twentieths into a hundredth fraction, into an equivalent fraction. So same thing as I did before, I'm going to look at my denominator and figure out what do I have to do to 20 to get to 100. So 20 will go into 100 evenly. It'll go 5 times, which means I can say 20 times 5 and 2 times 5. So that fraction is equal to 2 times 5 is 10, 20 times 5 is 100. So that fraction is equal to 10 over 100. So then down here I've got 7 hundredths, I've got 2 hundredths, and I've got 10 hundredths, and I need to put them in order from least to greatest. 2 is my smallest number, so it goes first, 2 hundredths, then 7, 7 hundredths, and then 10, 10 hundredths. So this is my order from least to greatest. Go ahead and flip it over. Now a lot of times we will have word problems where we have to compare decimals and fractions. So if that's the case, you've got to break down that word problem. The table shows the grades that 5 students received on their last math test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students. These are their scores. So this is 85 hundredths. That's like saying you made an 85 out of a 100. 15 twentieths. We're going to have to figure out what that one is. 8 tenths. Figure out what that one is. 97 hundredths, that's like a 97 out of 100. And 79 hundredths, that's like 79 out of 100. The question wants us to compare the student scores in order from greatest to least. So we're looking biggest to smallest. Who scored the highest? So we first need to order them and then answer who scored the highest. So we don't need to just stop at that order. So let's make all of these either fractions or decimals first. It looks like it's going to be easier to turn them all into decimals because we have more decimals. So basically, we need to get these two fractions into hundredths, because that's what these decimals are in, and then write them as a decimal. So let's start with 8 over 10. It's a little bit easier. We want to take this 10, and we want to make it into 100. Well, I know 10 times 10 is 100, so I'm going to multiply the bottom and the top by 10. 8 times 10 is 80, and 10 times 10 is 100, so that's 80 hundredths as a fraction, and then as a decimal, I would write that as 0.80, 80 hundredths. And then 15 twentieths, I know 2 times 5 gives me 10, so 20 times 5 would give me 100. So I'm going to multiply by 5 here, and I'm going to multiply by 5 here. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to also do to the top. So first, I've got to say 20 times 5 gives me 100. Then I have to say 15 times 5 gives me 75. So then that right there, 75 hundredths as a decimal, 0.75. Now, you could have also used what we did yesterday and changed your fractions into decimals, where we divide our numerator by our denominator. So here, if I said 15 divided by 20, remember 15 goes on the inside. Well, 20 won't go into 15, so I add a decimal 0, carry that decimal up top. 20 will go into 150. And we'll go 7 times. 20 times 7 gives me 140. Subtract that, and I get 10. Well, 20 won't go into 10, so I have to add another 0 and bring that down. 20 will go into 100. We'll go 5 times. So there is your 75 hundredths that we found right up here too. Okay, let's go ahead and do that 8 tenths as well. We're dividing 8 by 10. So remember, 8 goes inside. 10 will not go into 8, so let's add a decimal there. Take your decimal up top. 10 will go into 80. 8 times 10 times 8 is 80. Subtract and get 0. 10 won't go into 0, so I add another 0, bring it down. Now I've got a double 0, so I have to take that one back up. So there's our 80 hundredths that we found up top as well. So 2 different ways to change it there. Now we answer the problem. Compare the student scores in order from greatest to least. So let's list them out, greatest to least. I have 97 hundredths, and that was K. Then I have 85 hundredths, and that was John. Then let's see, I have 80 hundredths, and that was Jackson. Then I have 79 hundredths, and that was Sophie. And then I have 75 hundredths, and that was Macy. So now I've got my numbers listed in order from least to greatest, and I labeled them, and that's going to help me answer my question of who scored the highest, which I can see right here is K. So K scored the highest. That's my final answer.